Good afternoon, I'm Brent Holland. Welcome to the show. This afternoon, Marina Nemet, prisoner of Tehran. In 1982, 16-year-old Marina Nemet was arrested on false charges by Iranian Revolutionary Guards and tortured in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. Now, at the time when most Western teenage girls are choosing their prom dresses, Marina was having her feet beaten by men with cables and listening to gunshots as her friends were being executed.
Well, they asked, "Are you ready to talk?" I said, "I swear to God, I don't know." And then they decided to handcuff me. So they handcuffed me, but I have very small bones. They realized my hands are going to slide out of the cuff, so they put both of my wrists together, and they put the two wrists in one cuff. And I heard my bones make a very funny, strange noise, like a crack. And I thought, oh my God, and the pain, I screamed my head off. And I realized, I can't do this. Like, if I knew where this girl was, I would have told on the spot. But the problem was that I didn't know. So then they tied me up. They tied me up to this bare wooden bed. I was lying down on my stomach. And they took off my shoes, my socks, and there was a length of cable there. Hamid picked it up, and he started lashing the soles of my feet. And then I don't know how, I lost the ability. I counted the strikes for just a few, and then I couldn't count it. I didn't know how to count basically anymore, and I was just begging God to make it stop.
This afternoon, Marina Nemet and her harrowing tale, Prisoner of Tehran, a memoir, right now on Brent Holland. So I'm going to start off by just saying salam.
Salam.
Chatori?
خوبم مرسی.
I'm Khubam also. Folks, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Marina Nemet. We're going to be talking about her stunningly in-depth book called Prisoner of Tehran, a memoir. Now, just to give you a bit of a background, folks, in 1982, 16-year-old Marina Nemet was arrested on false charges by Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Now, let's all remember, folks, Iran is not Canada. They can just come by anytime they want to and grab you and disappear you. She was taken to that notorious place called Evin prison. Now, for those of you that were watching the news in June during the elections in Iran, you'll know all about that prison. It is notorious for murders, rapes, tortures, all the most horrible things in the world. At a time when most Western teenage girls are choosing their prom dresses, Marina was having her feet beaten by men with cables and listening to gunshots as her friends were being executed. Now, she survived only because one of the guards fell in love with her, and we're going to be getting into that, and threatened to harm her family if she refused to marry him. This is Iran, folks. Soon after her forced conversion to Islam and marriage, her husband was assassinated by rival factions. Marina was returned to prison, but ironically, it was her captor's family who eventually secured her release. What an incredible story we're going to be getting into this afternoon. An extraordinary tale of faith and survival. Prisoner of Tehran is a testament to the power of love in the face of evil and injustice. It is my great pleasure to welcome Marina Nemet to the show. How are
Thank you
you?
so much for having me. I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Let's start off right away. 16 years old, and they just come
Yes,
and
that's
grab
right.
you. Now, what was their
Yes.
excuse for throwing you into Evin prison?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that they don't need an excuse. Basically, if they decide that they want to grab you and take you anywhere, they will just do that. But, basically my crime was having spoken against the government in my school because don't forget that this was very shortly after the success of the revolution. And we were the generation who had grown up during the time of the Shah, the king of Iran. And he had really, really tried to westernize the country. So we had grown up reading a lot of English literature, Jane Austen, Ernest Hemingway. And we had grown up listening to the Bee Gees and watching the Donny and Marie Osmond show and, The Little House on the Prairie. So this was the generation we had grown up wearing bikinis on the beach and wearing mini skirts and tight t-shirts. So this was who we were. And then this revolution, when it succeeded, it promised the people of Iran freedom and democracy. But that is not what happened. So in school, when things began to become difficult, how did they become difficult? They gradually replaced our teachers, who were wonderful teachers, with fanatic young women who were not qualified to teach. So after 6 months, we found ourselves sitting through propaganda instead of maths and sciences. And that was really depressing. And then the hijab became mandatory, and then newspapers were being shut down, and then books were becoming illegal, and Jane Austen was becoming illegal, and I couldn't listen to the Bee Gees anymore. So there was a lot to be angry about. And when you're a teenager, and especially when you've had a revolution on your hand, you would speak up. So that's exactly what I did, and I was not the only one. A lot of teenagers were speaking up. And the arrest began in 1981. I wasn't one of the first ones to be arrested. I was arrested in 82. And they would always come to your house at night, rarely during the day, because they didn't want to attract attention. And then they would just take you to the prison, and basically what they said to everybody was that you are an anti-revolutionary and you will be punished. So this was our crime, to be anti-revolutionary. And, it's a very wide spectrum of what an anti-revolutionary means. So that was why I was arrested.
Now, they were accusing you to be an anti-revolutionary, but exactly what was your crime? Were you just protesting the government? Were you actually out there causing violence?
I wasn't causing violence at all. None of us, teenagers were causing violence. We were on the streets, of course. We were on the streets. Right now, we saw after the June elections in Iran just recently, this last summer, that the people of Iran, they spilled onto the streets and they demanded freedom. So we were doing the same thing. Back then, there was no internet and no YouTube, so of course nobody saw it. But we were on the streets. These were peaceful demonstrations. We were yelling and screaming against the hijab and against, the freedoms that were basically being taken away from us. And the Revolutionary Guards attacked every single one of these demonstrations. And, we would run for our lives. They've got tear gas bullets and everything flying all over. But when you're 14, 15 years old, you think you're invincible. So I just ran, and every time I made it home, your body is full of adrenaline, and you're thinking, oh gosh, I made it, and then you would go again. And I wrote articles against the government in my school newspaper, and basically I spoke out every opportunity I got. I argued with the teachers, I argued with the principal, I started a school-wide strike against our lessons being replaced by government propaganda, and all of that added up.
And you were deemed a political threat to the government at 14 years old.
Yes, absolutely. The thing is that, if you really think about it, you look at the Russian Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, the Iranian Revolution, they all know when you're trying to run a country in a very, basically suffocating country. You start with the young generation because the 40, 50-year-olds, they have a mortgage to pay. They have to put food on the table for a family. Right. They have their own problems. Your problem are the teenagers. That is where you start. If you want to control the country, you control this young generation, and then the future is yours.
Absolutely. Can you describe to us a little bit about pre-1979? I realize you were quite younger at that point.
I was actually 13. I
You
was
were
13 when the revolution happened.
1979? Okay.
Yes, I was born in 65.
Okay. Just to let folks know what it was like under the Shah and after the Shah when the Ayatollah came in.
Before Khomeini, before 79, again, I was about 13 and a half when the revolution succeeded. Before that, I'm from a Christian family. I'm Christian. And back then, I never felt that my being a religious minority was an issue in any way. I went to Zoroastrian High School for girls. And at the time, about 98% of the population of Iran were Muslim, and about 2% were religious minorities. But it wasn't an issue at all. I went to Zoroastrian High School for girls because it was a good school and it was close to my house. That was that. And I never felt any different from anybody else. I grew up, from my perspective, in a relatively happy world. My family was a middle-class family.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in the heart of downtown Tehran. My father was a ballroom dancing instructor. My mother was a hairdresser. And we rented in Tehran, but we owned a cottage by the Caspian, where I spent my summers, again, dancing on the beach, wearing little bikinis. And, at the age of 12, I started flirting with boys and getting interested in music and pop culture and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So my life, I guess, would be comparable at that time to the life of maybe a young girl in Canada. Of course, not all of Iran was like that. Again, if you move to the villages or to poor areas, it was different. It was much more backward than how it was in the center of Tehran or, the higher class neighborhoods. But my life was happy and it was good, and I didn't even know that the Shah was a dictator because I was just a kid and
Sure.
my family had never been involved in politics.
That sets it up very, very well. You mentioned Zastroshian. I was wondering if you could tell the folks exactly what that religion entails.
Zoroastrianism, it started in Iran about 3,000 years ago. Actually, we call them Zartoshti. And their prophet Zoroaster, or Zartosht as we call him, he invited the people to believe in one and only God, whom he called Ahura Mazda. And the motto of the Zoroastrian faith is good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And they are just very good, very laid-back, quiet people. And I think right now their population has really shrunk. That much I know. The last number I saw was that there are only 50,000 Zoroastrians left in Iran, and the population of Iran is right now around 72 million.
That's right.
So, you can imagine it used to be the main religion of the country, but then, the country, it was taken, overtaken by the Islamic army in the 7th century, and then gradually Islam became the main religion.
Are you still practicing now? You're living in Toronto now.
I am
in
Christian.
Canada. Sure.
I'm a Christian, and yes, I'm Catholic, and I try to go. I try to church every weekend, but yes, I'm definitely a practicing Catholic.
Okay. Not many people realize that there are other religious minorities, as you said, that come out of Iran. Most people think the vast majority, of course, is Shia. So
yes, the vast majority is about 90%.
About 90%. Okay.
Then right now, 9% are Sunni, and the remainder 1% are Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, and Baha'i.
Baha'i. I run into a lot of Baha'is also. I would like to stay in the demographics a little bit of Iran, just so folks can kind of identify. Many people I speak with are under the impression that Persians are Arabs, that all Muslims kind of mush together. And you say, oh no, right away. Okay.
No, because this is a misconception. And not that, I love Arabs. Arabs, I have many Arab friends, and I absolutely love them.
Understood.
The thing is that because we are not Arabs, when people think we are, it's just this, our identity is kind of lost. And that is really upsetting. No, Persians are not Arabs. Persians come from, this large area that used to be called the Persian Empire. And the civilization, basically it started by the Aryan nomads that moved to that area probably around 4,000 years ago. And, they created villages, and they gradually, it turned into civilization. And then it turned into the Persian Empire. When the Arabs, they basically live, let's say, to the west of what was called the Persian Empire, in the area of, let's say, Iraq and Lebanon and Syria. And of course, Egyptians are not Arabs either, but the Egyptian identity and the Arab identity, they have kind of become intertwined. So right now it's kind of hard to tell which is which, but definitely Persians are different.
I just want to mention...
They speak a different language.
Absolutely. They speak Farsi, whereas Arabs speak Arabic.
Yes.
You're listening to The Brent Holland Show. For more information on today's guests, as well as free podcasts and downloads, please go to the www.brenthollandshow.com website, www.brenthollandshow.com.
I just want to mention, too, Cyrus. I'm sure many of you that have studied the Old Testament of the Bible have heard of Cyrus. And he may be one of the greatest people to ever have lived. The reason being, he lived, close to 6,000 years ago. He was the head of the Persian Empire. And he brought in basically democracy. He had a whole scroll laid out of basic human rights, and you can find that scroll today in New York in the United Nations in the foyer as soon as you walk in. So that's a little bit of Persian history. That was the start of democracy. That's where the West and all these ideas really initiated, was with the Persian Empire. So there's a lasting legacy there of tolerance, a lasting legacy of just people living side by side. It's not the focus of the show, but it's important to give a context. Mm-hmm. Let's jump forward to 1982. Mm-hmm. They come and grab you. What was that like for you? Must have been horrifying.
People sometimes forget when I write about these things, I speak about these things. I guess it is very difficult for normal people who have never had anything extreme like that happen to them to imagine it. And I know now that age plays a huge part in how you see the situation. I was 16. Mm-hmm. If I had been older, maybe in my 20s or 30s or 40s, I probably would have seen the situation differently. But when you are very young and you don't have much experience to fall back on, what happens is that you enter a state of shock. You enter a state of shock that just doesn't let go. So I didn't feel afraid. I didn't feel anything. It was basically like watching a movie, and I wasn't a part of it. Nothing bad was going to happen to me. And I was looking at my mom and my dad, and they were both crying. So I was wondering, why are they crying? There's nothing wrong here. They're going to take me, ask me a few questions. All is going to be well. That was my perception at the time.
They take you into the prison. The door closes. What happens next?
Yes, well, the gates closed. And back then, Evin had become a compound, and it was surrounded by tall brick walls and barbed wire and guards. And you couldn't see anything from the outside. And then when we actually, just the walls, and when we arrived, they blindfolded me. So then when we entered, I still couldn't see anything. Well, not much. But when you're blindfolded, I hope you have never been, but when you are, there is a narrow strip of light just underneath the blindfold, especially if you don't try to put it on too properly, that you can actually see a little bit of what's on the floor. So, they walked me into a building, up the stairs, down the stairs, up the stairs, down the stairs, and then along hallways, basically. And I could see that there were hundreds of people sitting on the floor. And when I looked at them, I could see their feet, and they all had running shoes on. So I could tell that they were teenagers, because adults usually wear dress shoes. Mm-hmm. So then they made me sit down, and I just sat waiting for hours and hours. And finally somebody came, called my name, and took me in for interrogation.
Folks, if you're just joining us, you are probably glued to your seat as I am. We are speaking with none other than Canadian author Marina Nemet and her book, Prisoner of Tehran, a memoir. Very easy to pick up the books. Chapters Indigo, right across the country. No problem whatsoever. It is right there, as soon as you walk in, you'll be able to find it. It is displayed very prominently in the stores. Also, if you just go to the www.brenthollandshow.com website, you'll see a copy of her book cover right there. Just click on that. That'll take you to Chapters Indigo. You could probably order it online. Probably be there. I guess within the next 24 or 48 hours. It is riveting. It is the true story of 16-year-old Marina Nemet, who was arrested on false charges by Iranian Revolutionary Guards and tortured. And she managed to escape Evin prison. And we all know what Evin prison is after watching the news and being glued to the television set in June, where all those people were taken and a lot were disappeared and tortured. This is the story of a true Canadian author. And I want to emphasize that because she did manage to escape and come to Canada and has decided to make Canada her home. Let's go back now to the interrogation, if we can, Marina, if you're up to talking about it. Can you describe in detail what happened to you?
Of course. They took me in a room, and I was still blindfolded. They made me sit on a chair, and I sat down. And my interrogator actually introduced himself and said, "My name is Ali, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I have to tell you that you better tell me the truth." And I really had no reason to lie, because everything I had done, everything I had said in school, every article I had written, every demonstration I had gone to, it was basically common knowledge. Everybody knew. All my friends knew, the principal knew, the teachers knew, everybody knew. So, okay, and he asked me, have you gone to demonstrations? Yes. Have you written articles against government? Yes. Do you have friends who work with Marxist groups and are supporters of anti-revolutionary groups? Yes. Are you a Marxist? No. I'm a Catholic. And then he wanted me to tell him the whereabouts of a girl. That was what he was really strongly insisting on. I had met this girl once. She was a member of Marxist group, a friend of mine, and she wanted me to join their group because she had read my articles, and she said they were really good. And I said to her, listen, I'm a Catholic, you're a Marxist, it's not going to work, you guys are great, but we are not going to get along. So she went her way, I went mine. Apparently she was being watched when she met with me, but she went into hiding and I was caught. So they wanted to know where she was. And when I told them, I don't know, they didn't take my word for it. So, and I didn't know. It was the absolute truth. This man actually read from the Quran to me because when I told him that I was a Christian, it was actually very interesting for him. I don't think he had ever seen a Christian in Evin prison. So he read from the Quran to me because Virgin Mary is the only woman who has been mentioned by name in the Bible, in the Quran. So he read that part from the Quran. He read and it was rather long. It took a while. He read me the Arabic, and then he read me the Persian translation. So I'm sitting there and thinking, what is going on here? And then when I couldn't give him the information he wanted, he walked me down another hallway, and we just went and then stopped, and then he made me sit down, and he said, okay, now you have time to sit here and think if you're going to share information with me or not. So I sat down, and there was a man screaming. So I could hear the sound of a lash landing on somebody's body, and then that person, who was a man, would scream his head off, and then people would be questioning him. I can't exactly remember what the questions were, but there were questions being thrown at him, and he would say, I don't know, I swear to God, I don't know, and he would be begging them to stop, but then they would just keep on going. And I sat there listening to this whole thing, and the cells in my brain, I guess they had disconnected. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't do anything. I was just, almost paralyzed. And then they came for me, and they grabbed me, and they took me in that room, and they took off my blindfold, so now I could see what was going on. It was a dirty room with a wooden bed in a corner, and there was a desk, a couple of chairs, and two men. Apparently one of them was Ali, and the other one, his name was Hamid. They were my interrogators. And, they asked, are you ready to talk? I said, I swear to God, I don't know. And then they decided to handcuff me. So they handcuffed me, but I have very small bones. I was even smaller at 16, very thin. And they realized my hands are going to slide out of the cuff, so they put both of my wrists together, and they put the two wrists in one cuff. And I heard my bones make a very funny, strange noise, like a crack. And I thought, oh my God. And the pain, I screamed my head off. And I realized, I can't do this. Like, if I knew where this girl was, I would have told on the spot. But the problem was that I didn't know. So then they tied me up. They tied me up to this bare wooden bed. I was lying down on my stomach. And they took off my shoes, my socks, and there was a length of cable there. Hamid picked it up, and he started lashing the soles of my feet. That is the main method of torture. It was the main method of torture. It probably still is in Evin prison. What happens is that you have a lot of nerve ends in your feet. And this is why the Chinese massage them, when even if your back hurts, that they're going to massage your feet. And imagine the exact opposite. The pain just is indescribable. It explodes in your body, and every single cell can feel it. I have never, ever experienced anything like that, ever in my life.
Oh
And it just kept on going. They just kept on beating me and saying, where is she? Where is she? Tell us, tell us. And I kept on saying, I don't know. And then I don't know how, I lost the ability. I counted the strikes for just a few, and then I couldn't count it. I didn't know how to count basically anymore. And I was just begging God to make it stop. And the thing is that I was hoping to lose consciousness, but I didn't. If you think you're going to pass out under torture, no, you're not. You're probably going to either die or just feel the whole thing. So then they finally stopped, and Hamid left the room. Ali untied me from the bed, and then I looked at my feet, and I actually laughed because I had never seen anything like it. They were huge. They were like overblown balloons, and I just couldn't believe that somebody could swell so much, and they were blue. My skin had not burst, so that was good. But then, that was basically that. And, I was then at that stage, I was allowed to go to the bathroom. I couldn't walk. They had to put me in a wheelchair.
Oh, my God. Folks, Marina Nemet is our guest this afternoon, and she's telling a harrowing story, true life story, of when she was 16 years old. Prisoner of Tehran is the name of the book, and she was arrested by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, taken to the notorious Evin prison. Marina, wow. It's so emotional. And yet, how have you dealt with that since? Because you seem detached from it now. It's almost like you're telling it from a third person.
Yes, that is the only way. For after, the whole ordeal was over, and then, it still took 6 years for me to be able to get a passport, and I basically had to pay to get a passport. A large sum of money to the government. But anyhow, I eventually got a passport. I eventually got out of Iran. And still for about 20 years, I was incapable of looking back in any way, not even slightly. I never even had a dream, a nightmare about the place. And then it gradually began to come back and to haunt me. And that was when I started to think, I started having nightmares, I started having flashbacks, all of that. I dealt with it eventually by writing about it. And then, as the story was on paper, I still had no intention of sharing it with anybody. I basically put it in my underwear drawer under my clothes. Mm-hmm. And then the nightmares wouldn't let go. So I realized that as long as this was a secret, there was no escape. So I decided to share it with the world. And, again, I was hoping for closure. There is no such thing. There is no closure. When something like that happens to you, you have to accept that it is there to stay. So you basically have to balance the light and the darkness. I think forgiveness plays a big role. You have to accept what happened and you have to put your life to good use as a survivor. You will never forgive yourself for having survived when others didn't, and that's a fact. So you basically have to do the best you can with your life. You basically do a marathon runner with no finish line in sight. So you have to use every ounce of your energy to make it hurt. And I think when 20 years goes by and then you start doing this, which in many cases that is how it goes. You know, you talk to Holocaust survivors. For most of them, it's the same. That time that goes by creates a buffer zone. So that buffer enables you to step back into that world without getting too hurt. It still takes a lot of emotional energy, but you learn to deal with it because this is why you lived.
I understand.
You're listening to The Brent Holland Show. For more information on today's guests as well as free podcasts and downloads, please go to the www.brenthollandshow.com website, www.brenthollandshow.com.
You mentioned Holocaust survivors. Last week I had the honor and privilege, like I do this week speaking with you, of speaking with a woman by the name of Lydia Reich. Lydia Reich was in the camps with Anne Frank. And my God, the thing she told me that kept her going, and perhaps it was the same for you, perhaps it was different, and I want to ask you what that is. She told me the thing that kept her going was she wanted to survive to bear witness. What kept you going during those times?
No, that wasn't the case at all for me. Back then, I couldn't think ahead.
I see.
Like when I was trapped in Evin prison, there was no future. All I could think of was that I want to go home. I want to go home and sleep in my own bed. I want to go home to my mom and dad, and I just want to be a human being again. There was nothing beyond that. You know, there was no grand, something, waiting for me. I want to save the world, or I want to bear witness, or, there was none of that. I just simply wanted to go home and sleep in my own bed. I couldn't see anything beyond that. And when I actually made it home, first night I got home after 2 years, more than 2 years in prison. It was astounding. I sat at the dinner table with my parents. You've been gone for more than 2 years, and you weren't on holidays, right? Even if you're on holidays, somebody would say, "Hey, did you have fun?" They talked about the weather. Nobody wanted to know. When something like this happens, and I have talked to Holocaust survivors, what really, really hurts is that people enter this realm of denial. It never happened. Forget it. Move on. Don't look back. Look ahead. And not that I was ready to sit down and describe to them immediately after how I had been tortured and et cetera, but it would have been nice if somebody said, when you're ready to talk, we are here to listen. So I played along. I tried to move on, and it seemed like I had succeeded. I seemed like a normal person. I didn't have any psychological imbalance or anything. I just didn't look like it. And then 20 years later, basically, I exploded.
I see. What gave you the security? Because I've talked with incest survivors as well. It's not the same thing. I realize that. But they have told me they bury it also. And eventually, when they feel secure enough, it kind of subconsciously allows it to come to the surface.
I think so.
What happened in your life to give you that security?
It's, I have talked, again, after, I started to write, and then recently I've been researching the effects of torture on children. So I've been trying to understand it. Now, a lot of it comes from my personal experience, but I also wanted to talk to professionals to make sure that I'm not getting things wrong here. So one of these professionals told me that, his name is Dr. Wittenberg at the Hospital for Sick Children. He told me that a survivor of that kind of trauma or any kind of extreme abuse, puts that trauma in a bubble, puts that bubble on her shoulder, and walks through life. And anything that threatens to burst that bubble, you avoid it. As a result, you avoid life. You even avoid extreme emotions, love, hatred, anything. and you try to keep it safe. But the problem with this is that, and you basically live a false life. You become a false person. You assume almost a new identity. You go into emotional coma, basically. And then, but the problem is that out there are these big needles. Now, they can be smells, they can be sounds, they can
Triggers.
be events, they can be, and yes, exactly. So that bubble becomes quite scratched after a while. And you know what? One day, something is going to pierce it, and then it will blow in your face. And that is when symptoms would appear, and that is when you would have to deal with it. Now, some people go crazy. Some people go jump off a bridge. And in my case, I decided to write about it. So, again, I had many triggers. I have a second book coming out next fall that actually talks about this. This title is probably going to be After Tehran. And it talks about 20 years later. Why does the survivor start telling?
I think it's so important what you've done. I can't say enough about what you've done in documenting what's happened to you on a personal level, so other people that have gone through traumatic events can understand that it is normal to feel what they're feeling. I think it's essential, not only that, but to reveal the horrors that are going on in Iran right now. Now, I didn't mean to gloss over the latter part of your story where you were married to Ali, and that's how you escaped. I was wondering if we could just encompass that story, just to finish that part of it up. We could just wrap that part of it up, because I want to talk to you about modern Iran, and I want to talk to you about you more than your relationship with Ali. But I think it's important for people to know what happened after that. Okay.
Ali, was one of my interrogators, and he didn't beat me, Hamid did, but he was standing there watching. So he was definitely an accomplice. Then he told me, now I was condemned to death by a court I never attended. The court was basically a Sharia judge sitting behind the desk, and he would spend 1 minute max with a file, and he would give death sentences out like candy. Because when you have thousands of prisoners in a prison that was built for only a few hundred, you have to kill them. Basically, it's just a matter of simple math. And I was condemned to death because I had not cooperated. And then Ali used his influence, whatever, to reduce my sentence to life in prison. So then he sent a cell block. And I was at the cell block for about 6 months with, just a few of my friends, and then the rest of the girls that I didn't know, and I got to know them in the prison, and we were all more or less in the same boat. The Evin was like a place between life and death. At any moment, you could be called for interrogation and you could be beaten up, or you would be called for interrogation and you would never come back. So that was life, and life was difficult in the cell block. Hygiene, food, you name it. The smallest thing that we take for granted was a huge problem in the cell block. But we were a bunch of resilient young girls, and we found a way to, we basically survived by sharing memories of our homes and families and birthday parties and New Year celebrations and all the good things, that we carried with us. And this gave us hope that we would go home one day. And then I was called 6 months later for interrogation, and it was scary. And my interrogator, Ali, was there, and I had not seen him in 6 months. And he said, "You're going to marry me or I will arrest your parents." So I put 2 and 2 together, and I thought, okay, if he arrested my parents, there would be no home to go back to. All that time I had survived because I wanted to go home, and if he arrested my parents, there wouldn't be a home. So I said, okay, fine, I'll do anything you want me to do. Now, I didn't exactly even know what it meant or what was going to happen. I just went for it because I didn't feel like I had the choice. So I became this man's wife. Basically, there was, again, a Sharia judge who made us man and wife. It took not even 5 minutes. And basically, I spent the nights with him after that in a part of his prison that is called 209. It's for solitary confinement. So I was mostly alone in a cell, and I would spend the nights with him. And I would sleep mostly during the day.
Can I just interrupt for a sec? Did you resent him for taking advantage of your situation and blackmailing you into that
Of
at the
course.
time? Of course.
I hated him with a passion.
Mm-hmm.
I basically became a zombie. I just, the nights were the way they were, and the days were just, I slept. I basically slept all day. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And it was an absolute nightmare. I basically became a double prisoner because this wasn't something I could talk to anybody about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, later I was moved to the South Block again, and what would I tell my friends? And this is not something you could just sit down and share with your friends over a bowl of soup. So I felt very shameful. I felt that somehow this was my fault. And Ali took me on short leaves of absence to see his family. And the very first time, I was expecting, his mother to be the evil stepmother from Cinderella because it was pretty obvious. I was the good, he was the evil, and his family were probably evil, and I was ready to hate them all. And then this little woman opened the door, and she grabbed me, and she took me in, and all the food in her fridge ended on the table in front of me, and she insisted that I should eat. And she said, "Oh my God, you're so pale. Do you need this? Do you need that? Can I do this, that?" And she really treated me with respect and kindness. And I had not seen any respect and kindness for a very long time. And it went a long way. And she explained to me that Ali had been a prisoner, a political prisoner during the time of the Shah, and had been tortured for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I realized that this man that I considered completely evil had been a victim like me. He had been in the same boat. He had been just like me. So what did that mean? Did that mean that I was going to become a torturer one day? Like, where was the line that is drawn that makes one person good and the other evil? How do we differentiate between people? And I got really confused over that. And that was when, gradually, slowly, my hatred slightly lifted, and I came to see him as a very conflicted human being. And he was having difficulties at his job, so I began to see that as well. It was almost as if he was looking for a way out but couldn't find it. So then he was assassinated 15 months after our marriage, and then it was his family who basically secured my release. The warden of Evin prison didn't want to let me go. He wanted to marry me off to another guard, and his family intervened, and they probably bribed everybody there, and they got me out.
And you were able to escape. Just a couple of quick questions. Well, the first one is more, I admire you because here is this horrible place and this man that has stripped your total humanity away. As you just said, you were a zombie. And yet you found it in yourself, your own inner humanity, to see the struggle within Ali, that human being. So I think that speaks volumes to the kind of person you are and the profound perception and quality of your character. And I admire you for that, under those incredible conditions, to see a human being in your persecutor. That's incredible.
I think it only has to do with my innocence at the time. Everything was so raw. Everything that was happening was so extreme, and I was so young. So I guess I didn't have a lens. I could really see things as they were. I think it would be much more difficult for a 25-year-old to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It is more practical for a 17-year-old to see things that way.
The other question I have is, are you still in touch with Ali's family?
No, I'm not.
Not at all.
We basically said goodbye. No, we said goodbye. When I was released, I was a liability to them. They were a liability to me. Because, let's face it, I was a prisoner.
Yes.
And they forced me. I was forced to convert to Islam when I was in prison. But they knew that I didn't do it because I meant it. I did it because I had to. So I'm sure they knew that one of the first things that I was going to do was to go back to our church. And that would have looked really bad on them, because betraying the religion in Islam is basically unforgivable. It is a crime punishable only by death. So they knew that, and we parted ways.
You're listening to The Brent Holland Show. For more information on today's guests, as well as free podcasts and downloads, please go to the www.brenthollandshow.com website. www.brenthollandshow.com.
And that was the end of it. Now, how did you get out of Iran to come to Canada, and where did you meet your husband?
I met my husband, Andre. We met actually before I was arrested. We met at my church in Tehran. He was the organist. I was in the choir. And then we were friends when I was arrested. And
I should warn you, I should have warned you about musicians, you know.
I know.
I compose
You're
music.
very charming.
I compose music for television and film, and that's how I got my honey, you see.
Well, there we go. I guess you guys just use it as a tool, right? Okay, fine, to get girls. Okay, whatever.
I tell you.
But, you know, he was lovely. He was just charming. And, you know, I fell in love with him before I went to prison. It was just we never said anything to each other. Mm-hmm. And then when I was released, he was still there. He had waited for me. So we got married pretty quickly. And then I had been told that at Evin, they told me I won't be able to leave the country for a few years. They won't let me. And so, you know, I went to the passport office and I did try, and they refused me. And then they said, okay, go to Evin prison because they are the ones who are saying you can't get a passport. So I went to Evin prison, and they said that I had to pay a deposit. They called it the deposit, a large sum of money, about $3,500 at the time. Under salary was like $60 a month, and it was a lot. So they said, if you pay that money, we will allow you to go. Now, I told them I wanted to visit my brother in Canada. My brother was in Canada. He left in 1979, and he came to Canada. I said, I want to go see my brother. They said, okay, pay the money. You can go for 1 year, but you have to guarantee your return. And if you don't come back, you're not going to get your money back. If you come back, we'll give you the money. And my father laughed at me. He said, you know what, you're going to give them the money. They're not going to give you a passport. But I took the money. I put it in a suitcase. I went to Evin prison, and I paid them, and they actually gave me a passport. I signed papers. That's all. I promised I'll be back, and I didn't go back.
I was going to ask you, have you ever been back since?
No.
That's it.
It's a very stupid thing to do, I guess. No, I knew because I was supposed to go back. I didn't go back.
Yeah, I did. So no, I meant to visit mom and dad or anything like that. Do they come here to visit you?
No, they actually moved to Canada. They moved to Canada in 1993.
Yes.
So they left not long after we left. They left and they came. They were like in their late 60s by then. So the government of Iran didn't care much about them or whatever happened to them.
Let's come forward now to June 2009 and the recent elections. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
In general, first of all, I was thrilled to see some movement in Iran. Mm-hmm. Not that there has not been movement. There has been movement in the 80s. We were the movement.
That's right.
And then it was silence. And then every few years you get pockets of protests in Iran, usually students, and they get out there and then they're silent. Mm-hmm. All the time. Every few years you have it. And then people are put in prison and tortured and executed, and then everybody else gets the message and things calm down. This year it was bigger. I think it was bigger. It got the opportunity to get bigger because people, because of the election and the fraud that went on, people could say, wait a second, but this is within the system. Within the system, you allowed us to choose between, let's say, Mousavi and Ahmadinejad, and we voted for Mousavi and you didn't count our votes. So this is within the system, and you're not even allowing us that. So they were outraged, and they got out onto the streets. But at the same time, and probably if I lived in Iran, if I lived in Iran, even though I have no faith really in Mr. Mousavi, I would have voted for him just simply because maybe the lesser of two evils. But Mousavi, he was the prime minister when I was in prison. He was the prime minister for 8-9 years. While I was in prison, he was the prime minister. So why didn't he do something to save thousands of innocent lives?
Exactly.
So, he's already done his test and he's failed. So I don't have faith in him as a leader at all. But what it showed was the anger and the desperation of the people of Iran. That kind of like when the ship is going down, you're just hanging on to anything that might float. And it seemed like Musavi might float. Well, it didn't exactly work out, and the protesters were silenced. But it just showed the world, what it did. It showed the world what was going on, because now is the generation of YouTube and the internet. We saw Nida Sultan bleed to death on the sidewalk. Many of my friends died. Many of them were younger, much younger than Nida Sultan, and nobody even knew. But after what happened, before that, when I went, to Iranian get-togethers, well, some of my close friends, of course, they knew what happened, and, they sometimes talk to me about it. But a lot of Iranians, they pulled themselves, back. They wouldn't ask me anything. They would look at me funny. They would say, why are you talking about these things? It makes us look bad in the world, like all this torture and rape and that stuff. But after June, people were actually coming up to me and they were saying, well, we're sorry. You told us what happened. You told us about the horror in Evin prison and we didn't listen to you. So, I think what it did was that it brought a lot of the dirt to the surface. And that is one step in the right direction.
I agree. Do you think Iran will be free within the next 5-10 years?
5-10 years? No. I doubt it. That will be a miracle, and I do believe in miracles because my getting out of Evin prison was a miracle. Precisely. And it did happen. So, yes, miracles do happen. A miracle can happen. But using my experience and my knowledge of history and how it operates, no. I don't see it in 5-10 years. Now, all dictatorships fall. Okay, so eventually it will fall. I have faith in that. But it's not. I cannot see it in the near future.
Would you go back? You see, as you know, my honey's Iranian, and she's she's brilliant. She's probably the smartest person I know in the whole world. She truly is.
Yes.
Except she's with me. What is that about? Okay, one error. What can I tell you? And a musician too. So coming back now, there has been an incredible brain drain from Iran. All these intelligent, incredible folks like yourself, talented, well-educated, going to other countries, and thank God they come to Canada. They are helping to build this country. That's what I love about Canada, is everybody comes here and builds it. And it's testament to the fact that people can live together with diverse backgrounds in peace and harmony, for the most part. And that's what I like about Canada. But there's been such a brain drain from Iran. If they were to become free, I think it would be necessary for talented folks to go back and show leadership.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Both of my children, well, one of them was born in Iran, but was not even 2 when we left, so he doesn't remember anything. And my other one was born here. And, even though, we speak Persian at home, and, we still do a lot of Persian dishes all the time, and they love Persian cooking, but
tell me about it.
They are Canadians. They are Canadian. But now, my kids have grown up, and they have their own lives, more or less. And if things change in Iran, definitely, my husband and I, we can go back. And we would love to go back because I'm just dying to walk those streets and smell those smells and go to my own church and, sing, all of those songs in Persian and watch this, just see those streets. I just see the Caspian again and walk, on the sandy beaches and just smell that sea, salty air and all of that. So I will most probably go back.
When it becomes
And I think there are a lot of people who would do the same thing because it is home after all. Yes, Canada is home number 2, but home number 1. And there's something that just draws you, that calls to you, that you spend sleepless night trying to remember what it looked like, what it felt like.
I understand that completely. Folks, if you're joining us, it's Marina Nemet I'm speaking with this afternoon, and she's been incredibly inspiring. She has gone through the depths of hell. Her book is called Prisoner of Tehran, a memoir. Very easy to get it. Just go to any Chapters Indigo right across the country, and they have it in stock. You just pick it right up. It's predominantly displayed. You won't have any problem. Easier way too, folks, if you just want to order it online. Go to the www.brenthollandshow.com website, www.brenthollandshow.com website. You'll see the book cover there. Just click on that. That'll take you to Chapters Indigo online. You can order it. Probably be there within 48 hours is usually the time limit for a book of this stature. Marina, you're virtually speaking with every university student in Canada right across the country. What would you like to say to them?
I would like to say to them, use your voice, because your voice is basically your most treasured, it should be your most treasured possession. And don't let anybody take that away from you. And I also want to say that there are right now many, I don't know how many, but many prisoners in Evin prison. And many of them are there on political charges, the same anti-revolutionary charge, more or less, or espionage or national security, that sort of thing. So I just want them to know, I know they cannot hear me, but nevertheless, I want them to know that they are not forgotten, that here we are advocating for them and we are fighting for them, and we will make sure that the world does not forget them. And I think this is basically for every one of us, for every housewife, engineer, doctor, university student, anybody, a high school student, to use our voices and to advocate for people whose voices have been taken away from them.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. I just want to thank you so much for several things. First of all, for writing your book and surviving that horrible experience that you went through. And I want to thank you for coming to Canada, for choosing Canada. I'm so glad you're here and have decided to make your life here and raising children, and welcome to your husband. I think it's fantastic that you're coming to contribute and live with us. It's amazing. And I love Persian food too. As I'm fond of saying, I have the perfect body since I met my honey for radio.
I see. Okay. I see. I totally agree with you. And I'm very proud to be Canadian. And I'm also very proud to be from Iran, to have been born there, to know the food, to know the language, and to know how amazing the people of Iran are, even though they are caught in a very bad situation.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I do want to invite you back when your new book is out. Please come back and speak with us again, because it has been most inspiring, not only for myself, but I imagine for everybody right across the country. I do want to wish you God bless, and I do want to wish you Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Brent. Merry Christmas to you too, and a Happy New Year.
Thank you. All the very best always, and Khodafez.
Khodafez. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.
I would like to thank Marina Nemet for having the courage to tell her story and having the courage to come on this show to let the world know of the atrocities that are taking place across the world, and particularly at the notorious Evin prison right now. And as she said, your voice does make a difference. I'm Brent Holland. See you next time.